The war in Ukraine has tested global alliances, revealing fissures and forging new partnerships. While initially united in their condemnation of Russia's actions, cracks have emerged in the seemingly unwavering support for Ukraine, particularly within the United States. A growing chorus of voices, fueled by concerns over corruption, aid mismanagement, and a perceived lack of progress in reforms, are questioning the extent and duration of American commitment to the conflict. This shift in sentiment reflects a broader debate about America's role on the world stage and its priorities in an increasingly multipolar world. The Biden administration, while maintaining its public support for Ukraine, has faced increasing pressure from both Democrats and Republicans in Congress to demonstrate tangible results from the billions of dollars in military and financial aid poured into the war-torn nation. This skepticism is rooted in a deep-seated mistrust of Ukraine's political elite, long plagued by allegations of corruption and a lack of transparency. The recent revelations of potential aid diversion and misuse have only amplified these concerns, leading some lawmakers to demand greater oversight and accountability. Furthermore, there is a growing sense that Ukraine, despite its valiant efforts on the battlefield, has not fully embraced the reforms promised in exchange for Western support. The pace of judicial and economic reforms, considered crucial for Ukraine's long-term stability and prosperity, has been slow and often met with resistance from entrenched interests. This perceived lack of commitment has fueled doubts about Ukraine's willingness to address the systemic issues that have long plagued the country. As the war drags on, with no end in sight, the American public is grappling with the costs and consequences of their country's involvement. The Biden administration faces the daunting task of balancing its commitment to supporting Ukraine's right to self-defense with the growing domestic pressure to prioritize American interests and address pressing issues at home. At the heart of America's growing frustration with Ukraine lies a deep-seated concern over corruption and the potential misuse of Western aid. Despite Ukraine's efforts to present a united front against Russian aggression, allegations of graft and mismanagement have persisted, casting a shadow over the country's wartime leadership. These concerns have been amplified by reports of Western-supplied weapons ending up on the black market, raising fears that aid intended for Ukraine's defense is being siphoned off for personal gain. The issue of corruption is not new to Ukraine. For decades, the country has struggled to shed its image as a hotbed of cronyism and embezzlement, with powerful oligarchs wielding undue influence over the political and economic systems. While the Maidan Revolution of 2014 raised hopes of a clean break from the past, progress in tackling corruption has been slow and uneven. The war, while uniting Ukrainians against a common enemy, has also created new opportunities for profiteering and exploitation. The Biden administration has repeatedly stressed the importance of transparency and accountability in the use of U.S. aid to Ukraine. However, the sheer scale of the assistance, coupled with the challenges of wartime oversight, has made it difficult to track the flow of funds and ensure they are being used for their intended purpose. This lack of transparency has fueled suspicions and provided ammunition to those who argue that American taxpayers are being taken advantage of. The issue of corruption is particularly sensitive in the context of the ongoing debate in Washington over the cost of supporting Ukraine. With billions of dollars already committed and the prospect of a protracted conflict looming, lawmakers are increasingly demanding assurances that American aid is being used effectively and responsibly. Failure to address these concerns could jeopardize future support for Ukraine, undermining its ability to resist Russian aggression. In contrast to the growing skepticism in the United States, European nations have largely maintained their steadfast support for Ukraine. France, Britain, and Germany, key players in the NATO alliance, have consistently reaffirmed their commitment to Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity, providing substantial military and economic assistance. This unwavering support stems from a combination of factors, including geographical proximity, historical ties, and a shared understanding of the threat posed by Russian aggression. For European nations, particularly those bordering Russia, the war in Ukraine hits close to home. The memories of Soviet-era domination and the fear of resurgent Russian imperialism are deeply ingrained in the collective consciousness of many Eastern European countries. They see Ukraine as a bulwark against Russian expansionism and its defense as essential to their own security. Moreover, European nations have made significant economic sacrifices to support Ukraine, imposing sanctions on Russia and providing financial aid to Kyiv. These actions have come at a cost, particularly in terms of energy prices and trade disruptions. However, European leaders have largely remained united in their belief that the costs of inaction far outweigh the economic pain of supporting Ukraine. The European Union has also played a crucial role in providing humanitarian assistance to Ukraine, welcoming millions of refugees fleeing the conflict and providing essential supplies to those displaced within the country. This humanitarian response reflects a deep sense of solidarity with the Ukrainian people and a recognition of the shared values that bind Europe together. The unwavering support of France, Britain and Germany has been crucial for Ukraine's ability to resist Russian aggression. Their military assistance, particularly in the form of advanced weapons systems, has helped Ukraine to level the playing field on the battlefield. Moreover, their political and diplomatic support has been instrumental in maintaining international pressure on Russia and rallying global support for Ukraine's cause. Section 4. A diplomatic thaw. The US and Russia seek common ground. In a surprising turn of events, the United States and Russia initiated high-level diplomatic talks in Riyadh on February 18, 2025, marking a significant shift in the geopolitical landscape. This meeting, the first of its kind in over 3 years, signaled a potential thaw in relations between the two superpowers, raising hopes for a negotiated end to the conflict in Ukraine. The talks, while shrouded in secrecy, were reportedly focused on finding common ground on issues of mutual concern, including arms control, counterterrorism, and the ongoing war in Ukraine. Both sides acknowledged the need to stabilize relations and prevent further escalation of tensions, recognizing the global implications of a prolonged conflict. The decision to engage in direct dialogue, despite the ongoing hostilities in Ukraine, reflects a pragmatic approach by both Washington and Moscow. The Biden administration, facing mounting domestic pressure to end the war and address pressing economic challenges, likely sees diplomacy as the only viable path to achieving a lasting peace. For Russia, the talks offer an opportunity to break out of its international isolation and explore potential avenues for easing the crippling sanctions imposed by the West. The Kremlin, while maintaining its maximalist demands regarding Ukraine, may be willing to explore a negotiated settlement that secures its strategic interests in the region. The Riyadh meeting resulted in an agreement to establish a consultation mechanism and restaff embassies, paving the way for more intensive diplomatic engagement. High-level teams will continue working on finding a resolution to the Ukraine conflict, although a breakthrough remains elusive. The exclusion of Ukraine from these initial talks has raised concerns in Kyiv and among its Western allies, who fear that any agreement reached without Ukraine's direct involvement could come at its expense. Section 5, an unlikely alliance. The surprise diplomatic outreach between the United States and Russia has fueled speculation about a potential realignment of global alliances. Some analysts suggest that the two superpowers, driven by shared interests in countering China's rise and stabilizing global energy markets, could forge a pragmatic partnership, reminiscent of the Nixon-era détente. The convergence of interests is undeniable. Both Washington and Moscow view China's growing economic and military might as a long-term threat to their global standing. A cooperative approach involving intelligence sharing and coordinated economic policies could serve to contain China's influence and maintain the existing balance of power. Furthermore, the ongoing energy crisis exacerbated by the war in Ukraine has highlighted the interdependence of the global economy. Russia, a major energy producer, and the United States, a major consumer, could find common ground in stabilizing energy markets and ensuring global energy security. However, a full-fledged alliance between the United States and Russia faces significant obstacles. The legacy of mistrust and animosity from the Cold War era, compounded by Russia's actions in Ukraine, has deeply strained relations. Moreover, any rapprochement with Moscow would likely alienate key US allies in Europe, who view Russia as an existential threat. NATO, the cornerstone of Western security architecture, would be particularly challenged by a US-Russia rapprochement. The alliance, formed to counter Soviet expansionism, would struggle to maintain its relevance and unity in a world where its two most powerful members are no longer aligned. A US-Russia alliance, while potentially beneficial in the short term, could have destabilizing long-term consequences. It could embolden authoritarian regimes around the world, weaken international norms, and trigger a new arms race. The risks of such a dramatic realignment of global power structures should not be underestimated. Section 6: Ukraine's uncertain future, navigating shifting geopolitics. As the United States and Russia explore the possibility of a rapprochement, Ukraine finds itself in a precarious position. The country, caught in the midst of a geopolitical tug-of-war, faces the unsettling prospect of being sidelined in negotiations that will ultimately determine its fate. The exclusion of Ukraine from the initial US-Russia talks in Riyadh has fueled anxieties in Kyiv that its interests could be sacrificed in the pursuit of a broader strategic understanding between the superpowers. The spectre of a grand bargain, reminiscent of the Yalta Conference where Ukraine's fate was decided without its consent, looms large over the current negotiations. Ukraine's leadership, while publicly welcoming the diplomatic efforts to end the war, remains wary of any agreement that would compromise its sovereignty or territorial integrity. The Ukrainian people, having endured immense suffering and sacrifice, are unlikely to accept a peace settlement that rewards Russian aggression or forces them to cede territory. The potential for internal unrest within Ukraine cannot be discounted. A peace agreement seen as a betrayal by Kiev, particularly if it involves territorial concessions, could lead to political instability and even renewed conflict. The presence of heavily armed militias and a deeply polarized society creates a volatile mix that could easily ignite. Furthermore, Ukraine's long-term security remains uncertain. Even if a ceasefire is negotiated, Russia is likely to maintain a significant military presence along its border, posing a constant threat to Ukraine's independence. Joining NATO while offering the most robust security guarantee seems unlikely in the current geopolitical climate, leaving Ukraine vulnerable to future Russian aggression. Ukraine's future hinges on its ability to navigate the complex web of international relations and secure its interests in a rapidly changing world order. It must leverage its strategic importance, garner continued international support, and demonstrate its commitment to reform to ensure its survival as a sovereign and independent nation.